Support, and welcome to EnvironMental Podcast.
Yeah, this is our podcast where we deep dive into different aspects of sustainability and have really dissectable conversations about it. I don't know if dissectable is the right word to use there, but
it is now.
It is now.
Yes, and today we are joined by Maya van Rossum, who is the founder of the Green Amendments for the Generations organization and an author of a new book called The Green Amendment. Thank you so much for being here, Maya.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me and helping me spread the word.
Spread the word.
Oh my gosh. To hear about Green Amendments, like who doesn't want to spread the word? It's such a cool concept. But yeah, can you explain it? Because I'm like,
yeah. So I love that you find it a cool concept, and I really do love that it really is an idea that resonates with people. And so I've been enjoying spreading the word and started my Green Amendment movement for the last few years now. So here in the United States of America, right? People hear all the time. Especially if you're an environmentalist or if you've gone to any environmental event, we have a right to clean water and we have a right to clean air. And I am the sad person in the back of the room that says, no, you don't. And you don't have that because while you might have it in your heart, you might have it in your mind. And certainly as a human here on this earth, that is an inalienable right. Here in the United States of America, it's not recognized as a constitutional right. And so when it is infringed upon, when it is taken from you by government action and activities, you cannot enforce it. There's no action you can take to defend it. Not like you have for the rights to free speech and freedom of religion, private property rights, even gun rights. When government behaves in a way that violates these rights and takes them away from you because you have a constitutional right in the Bill of Rights section of our state and federal constitutions, you can actually do something about it. But when it comes to the rights of people to clean water and clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments, because it's not recognized at that highest constitutional level, when government behaves in a way that infringes upon those rights, you're kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. And what a Green Amendment is literally, it's by its placement and by its language, it raises up environmental rights to that highest constitutional level. So it is on par with those other human, civil, and political rights we hold dear.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, how it's not already a part of our Constitution is just kind of mind-blowing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. I was just saying, I think somebody has to do that. There wasn't a question of it when the Constitution was written, right? Yeah. Like clean air and clean water were everywhere. But now, now it's an issue. Somebody has to take it on, and it's really cool that you are, Maya.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying it that way. But the truth is I sort of had the vision and am carrying forward this powerful idea that we had advancing here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in very significant part because of a gentleman named Senator Franklin Curry. Right. But in order to make a Green Amendment happen at the state level and ultimately at the federal level, right? This is a movement that's starting state by state by state. We are going into every single state and trying to get a state constitutional Green Amendment. And then ultimately we'll get one at the federal level. Because at this point, we have a Green Amendment in Pennsylvania. We have one in Montana. Just last year, we passed one in New York. But that's it. And of course, we all know that we don't have it at the federal level. But the truth is, right, we're only going to get these amendments because leaders in each of the states across our nation are going to come together and people are going to come together with them and advocate for this. And so this really is a community effort. And when we succeed, it is a community success because, of course, the Constitution belongs to the people. So, like I said, it's nice of you to say about me carrying the ball, but it's just an idea, and it's an idea that will happen because of the people.
Yeah. And that's something that we found really interesting. And looking through, the book and the site, we're seeing a lot of when the time is right for the federal amendment. And I kind of am wondering if you have a plan, maybe not a timeline, but like a number of states that need to, that like just in your mind that like if 14 states or 30 states, adopt an amendment, when you would approach that federal level?
So I think I really appreciate that question, because one of the biggest fears I have is when people hear about this idea of having a constitutional green amendment and see how powerful it is, because they know how powerfully their rights to free speech are protected. They see how powerfully gun rights are protected. They know that because we did not have an explicit right, women's rights to an abortion, that just got taken away by a set of 6 justices. So, people see the power and the value of this. And often they will hop to that federal level and say, well, we need to get one at the federal level, as though that's the be all and end all. And the truth is, as you suggested, we're not ready for that. If we went to secure a green amendment right now today in the federal constitution, it would be an abysmal failure. And a whole lot of money and a whole lot of energy would be invested in getting something that we're just not ready to get. And so the idea of my Green Amendment movement is to start at the states, as you said, and go state by state by state, because constitutional amendments are very accessible at the state level. They happen all the time. And there it really is about the people getting them. For the federal Green Amendment, you need 3/4 of the states to actually vote in support. It's not going to happen because of a vote of the people like happens at the state level. And so I think what's going to happen, I think, what we're going to experience is that there's going to be this learning curve, this enthusiasm, this getting to understand and experience the power of green amendments as we start to secure them in states across the nation. And I think we're just going to know, right? Organically, we're going to know that the moment is right to start to hop on that path and add it to the state movement. My hope is that we're really going to get enough of that positive energy and engagement within like the next 5 years, because the truth is we don't have much time to save the world.
Right.
And I believe this is an important part of saving our nation, saving communities, and when it comes to climate, to saving the world. So my hope is that it is going to be sooner rather than later.
And I think that makes sense because, Pennsylvania is a swing state. And if you can, and it has decided, as we've seen, has decided elections. So I feel like if we can make that happen in states like Pennsylvania, I think it would definitely be possible. I started sending information to my parents in Michigan being like, let's start getting this, let's start talking about it.
So that is superb, because I can just tell you, yesterday I was on a, did I pop off?
No, you're okay.
So Michigan was really great. It's really great that you mentioned Michigan, because just yesterday I was on my regular phone call with a group of activists from the state of Michigan. And, we're putting together the plan, how we're going to educate, inform, engage people, what would be the right language for Michigan, because to be a green amendment is not just any language about the environment in the Constitution. I mean, the truth is almost every state talks about the environment in their constitutions. Many of them even talk about environmental rights, but they don't do it in the way that raises the environment up to that highest constitutional level. They do it in a way where they say, well, people have the right to clean water and clean air, and this is our state policy. Policy is good advice. You can take it or you can leave it, and legislators always leave it. Or they say you have a right to clean water and clean air as defined by the laws passed by your General Assembly or your legislators. Yeah. But that's the situation we have now, right? We can't leave it to the politicians to decide what is clean water and what is clean air and whether or not our rights have been taken from us. Right. So what a green amendment does is different. It makes this a right of the people that belongs to the people. It is what we call self-executing in the law, meaning it has legal life in its own right. So when you have a right to clean water, clean air, a stable climate, or healthy environments, if you're experiencing a significant problem that you believe rises to that constitutional level, you can turn to the Constitution to get your remedy. You don't have to find that state law that allows you to go to court and find a pathway forward, because the way the laws are written now, I mean, they are written to legalize pollution, not prevent it. So very often, if you had to turn to the state law would say it's just fine.
Right.
That's why you need the higher power of the Constitution. So the Green Amendment fulfills these certain criteria. It has to be in the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution and some other things. But it's not cookie cutter language. Every state is different. Every state has its own personality. The people have different concerns and issues. You know, some are oceanfront, some are plopped in the middle, you know, some are on the Great Lakes. So what I do when I work with a community is we first work together. Well, it's not the first thing we do, but one of the first things we do is say, what's the right language for your state? Here's the criteria. Here's some model language. Here are some options. Let's work together and figure out the right language for your state and the right strategy for your state. And then we move it forward together. So in Michigan, as with a number of other states, we're in some, those early planning stages. So I expect to have an announcement in that state soon, but we do have nearly a dozen other states where language has already been put forth and people are getting active around it.
And so what does that look like? You said that it's a vote of the people for the amendment at the state level. So you get this language and then it goes into like the primary or the, state voting.
So for some states, they have what's called ballot initiative, right? And so you can put forth the language and then the people have to come together and there's a whole process. And it really is entirely about the people supporting it and then ultimately voting on it. But in many states, or most states, truthfully, there is another option, or there is just a different path, and ballot initiative isn't an option. And in those states, the way it works is that legislators actually put forth the amendment proposal, and the amendment has to make it through the legislative house. Sometimes it has to make it through by a vote of the House and the Senate, majority vote one time. Sometimes it has to be in 2 consecutive sessions by majority vote. Sometimes it can be like in New Jersey, you can either have 2 votes of the legislature and you have to have a majority vote each time, or you can have 1 vote of 1 legislative session, but then you have to have a 2/3 majority. But so different states have different processes. But once you're done that process, it then goes on the ballot for a vote of the people. The governor doesn't get to veto it. They don't have a role in it. So it's about the people getting their legislators to understand the power of and importance of this, passing it by whatever the rules are, and then it goes before the people. And like in New York State last year, the people passed it by 70% of the vote. And it's really like, if you can get it before the people, you're pretty golden. The biggest problem we've had at the legislative level is legislators really misusing the process, where they won't put it up for a vote at the committee level. So it gets stymied. And it can't advance. And, like in New Jersey, a majority of the state legislators are co-sponsors on the New Jersey Green Amendment. Wow. And the only reason why it hasn't advanced is because the people in power haven't put it up for a hearing. So it's not by any means like easy. Right. Yeah. It's work, but it is achievable work. And the truth is, while it is harder to get a constitutional amendment than it is to get a piece of legislation, that also means that once you get it, you're not losing it. And that is one of the powerful benefits of the Green Amendment pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amendments aren't overturned. Well, they can be, but that's really hard to do. That's actually.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to go through that whole process again. And you would have to get the people, not 6 Supreme Court justices. Mm-hmm. You would have to get the people to say, we're willing to give up a fundamental right, not a bunch of old white guys say, we're going to take it away from you.
Mhm.
Sorry. So, and that's just not likely. It's just not likely to happen. The other thing that's really important for people to understand too, when it comes to the environment, the federal government has a lot of power, right? And there are a lot of things the federal government does. But at the state level, the state also has a tremendous amount of power when it comes to environmental protection. In fact, the entire environmental protection system in the United States of America was crafted to sort of be divided power, with the federal government having power over certain things, but the state government having power over a lot of other things, and the state government always being allowed to do more and better than what the federal government has done. So, they might give the floor for the amount of air quality protection that must be achieved, and the states can do more, right? Can require more to be more protective. So that is why the Green Amendment movement makes so much sense, to have this state and then this federal approach, because you get a tremendous level of benefit out of having a state constitutional amendment, but it doesn't displace the need for a federal amendment. You need that too, in order to check the power of the Congress and the president. And then similarly, if we were to get a federal Green Amendment right now and today, we would still need state level green amendments to cover that whole universe of authority that belongs to the state. So we really need them both.
Yeah.
And given that the state level is more accessible and really is about people power, that's why, I think that this is the approach that resonates and works. And, when people in a state start to hear about this and realize that it's something that they can come together around in their state, it really is quite electrifying. You can see it click in people's minds when you're giving a talk in the room. And that's really a lot of fun.
Yeah. Where you're like, this is possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's really, as somebody who wants to find these types of really progressive movements, it can be challenging to find kind of a singular goal that can be easily communicated to people, and it's just something that clicks, and I think that this language, and particularly the kind of process that you've just outlined, is what the progressive movement really needs, and I think it's what a lot of people are craving. So that's what was so exciting for me, definitely, to see there's a framework,
And it doesn't matter what your environmental issue is or your social justice issue is. If you're the person that cares about rivers and water or drinking water supply or clean air, if you care about environmental justice, if you care about the climate, if you whatever, if you care about species and habitat protection, whatever is your environmental issue, getting a constitutional green amendment helps you in your movement. And that's the other thing, is that this really does cross movements. So, it's not you're fighting for water over there and you're fighting for wolves over there. It's that we're coming together. We're going to each do our individual fights, but we're going to come together around this common goal of a green amendment that will lift up, the benefit or create benefit for all of us. I want to say lift up all boats or whatever, but I don't know. I don't really like that saying. So,
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point. And that's something that we've definitely talked about before, where we see, and because we work with nonprofits, we work with sustainable brands, we see them in a silo. It's a lonely thing for a lot of people working in environmental justice or any nonprofit world, because you're focused on solving a real issue. And there's all these other people that are kind of on their own islands working to solve their own issue. And this feels like a way that kind of bridges that gap a little. And that's one piece until you just said that, I hadn't really thought about this as a network creation and something that brings everything together. And like you're saying, kind of sets a bottom line, but at least now we're not trying to dig ourselves out of a hole when you're working to save the wolves, for instance, or, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, but the other thing is it can be hard to get people to see that, right? And so when they're in the battle to get up to get the cleanup of the toxic site, in their neighborhood, it can be hard to say, but I need to add to my palette of work fighting for this constitutional right, because if and when I get that, it's going to help me in this battle. Somehow that very focused, intentional battle, right? It is easy to, you want to save your community, right? And so that's what that does. So it's important. It can take time to get people to really see that. And also people have to experience the reality that in the environment, there are very few battles that happen quickly. They happen over the period of years. And I can tell you, being an environmental activist and attorney, there are several issues that I'm still battling today for protection of the Delaware River that I was battling for way back in 1992. Exact same issue, exact same facility, killing over 14 billion Delaware River fish every year, needlessly, legalized by permit, coming out of the state government and coming out of the federal government. When you've experienced the length of time that these battles can take, that's when you say, you know what, if during that 30 years, I had been working to get a constitutional green amendment in the state of New Jersey and now had one, wow, that might have actually helped me win that battle against the Salem nuclear generating station, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because I could have perhaps used it to challenge that permit because it was needlessly killing so many fish and having such huge devastating consequences. But it is hard, many people, most people, I think, you're getting involved in an issue to save your community, to save your neighborhood. And it takes a lot of time and energy. It takes a lot of money. And so and I don't want to take people's attention away from that good work. So that's why one of the reasons why I decided that it was really important to create another nonprofit organization and really create my own organization to carry forward this vision so that I could be helping people do their work and advance the Green Amendment movement and not, pulling them away from it. And I could be helping try to identify financial resources to support the advancement of the Green Amendment in the state that will help everyone. But you know what? Also maybe raise the profile of these local battles that will be benefited by having a constitutional Green Amendment, which has the added benefit of funders who are paying attention saying, oh, that's a really important local battle. That's a really important environmental justice issue. That's a really great organization. Maybe I'll support them too. So I do see that there's so many synergies, but I am very, very mindful as, having been an activist for so many years, of really respecting that it can be hard, for people to pick their battles and to prioritize what to do. So my hope is that I can sort of pick this battle for people, help them make it happen while they can also continue on the very important local battles that they have to take on to save their community and their family or the species that they care about.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very, very nicely said. I like that.
Wow.
I tend to be very frank with people. Like people will think I'm a little, and I will come in and I will say, look, let me be very clear with you, right? Like I'm not coming in, I'm not asking you for money. And, and this is a powerful growing movement. And no, I don't have gobs of resources, but I'm going to do anything and everything I can to help you. And, let's just put it on the table, right? I understand it takes money to do this work, to do the local work that you're doing. So I don't want to ask you to join this Green Amendment movement just gratuitously. Like I'm going to do everything I can to really lift all boats. And I think we just have to, as a movement in the environmental arena, we really do just have to be honest with each other. There are realities of life. People don't have the time and the resources to take on these battles. I mean, it does take resources, and that's why we do need foundations. And that's why we do need people out in the world making donations to support that work, because it's hard work, it's long-term work, but it is work that once it's accomplished, it really benefits everybody. So it's kind of like public radio, right? Like I say, you're listening for free, but make a donation. And it's kind of like the same thing. Everybody's benefiting from National Public Radio, whether or not they're listening, when we have environmental battles and victories going on, everybody is benefiting, whether or not they're contributing and whether or not they know it. So, I'm hoping that, people start to recognize that the people on the front lines doing this work aren't just doing it for themselves. They're doing it for everybody. So go support your local nonprofit.
Yeah.
Support your
also
local nonprofit. Yeah.
But I think that was a really good point that, folks have we only have so much capacity for our time and energy and attention. So giving each other grace on, the battles that we can fight, I think is a really important message in the sustainability movement in general, where, not everybody can fight every fight.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're against something just because they're focused.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's no such thing as a bad activist if you're actually caring about some sort of an issue. Right.
Right. If you're actually doing the work, there are people, I don't want to say bad activists, bad actors. And there are organizations that will engage in greenwashing, which I believe is a very bad thing.
That's bad.
That's true. I wouldn't even consider that activism. That's just bad marketing.
But right, there are some organizations that do breast cancer work and are very well known, and they take big money from the fossil fuel industry, and the fossil fuel industry then gets big pink drill bits to drill and make this show that they're helping to fight that battle. And and I think that the argument that, we need the money to do the work justifies taking it, I just think doesn't fly, because that fossil fuel company, of course, is spewing contaminants into the environment that are giving people cancer, including breast cancer.
Yeah. Right.
So unfortunately, we do see that in our work. But most people are really being conscious. And as you said, they're out there and they're trying to do the right thing and they're working really, really hard. And it can be hard sometimes to know what's the right thing. And it can be easy. Some company wants to give you big money to support your work. It can be easy to justify it and say, well, I need to do this, and because there's some greater good. But failing to recognize that helping that company do whatever it is they're doing that's causing a greater bad, somebody who's getting that cancer and dies, they're not going to get their life back. You can find somewhere else to get those few dollars. So
divesting. I remember when The Guardian, the news, they divested from fossil fuels because fossil fuels were a really big part of their donations, and it was a huge deal. And they made a whole and they came out about it and talked about it, and it was a really big long series, and people, myself included, now donate to them because they were we divested from fossil fuels. We're not taking them anymore because we talk about climate change. This is a real issue. If we're going to talk about it, we're not going to support them. We're not going to take money from them. And they got more donations because they divested and were transparent about it than they received from the fossil fuel industry to begin with as a donation there. I feel like that's such a, and they've talked about that too. And I think that's a really nice way to, and it's The Guardian, and they're huge. And I think that's a really nice way to set an example.
Yeah. I didn't know that story. That's really great. That's really great.
It's a good source. Because I live in Europe, it's a really good main source of English.
Oh, I read them a lot. I just didn't know that.
For me, I'm this is where I can get my English news. English.
It's a good example though. The power of taking a stance. One where you've gotta it'll hit your pocketbook at first, but then you'll get lifted up by your community. The
other thing about the Green Amendment that sometimes isn't obvious to people right from the get-go is it's really powerful for environmental justice. And in fact, what I'm encouraging people more and more to do is actually work the environmental justice language explicitly into their Green Amendment language to say these are rights that belong to all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, wealth, or geography. But even if you don't say that, because of the Bill of Rights placement and because of other elements of the Green Amendment, it actually requires government constitutionally to protect the environmental rights of all people equitably. Mm-hmm. And so if you can show that you live in an environmental sacrifice zone where, they're spewing so much pollution into the air that it's diminishing the capacity of your children to learn. I mean, those kinds, that's what air pollution does, right? It affects every aspect of our lives. And here the government's looking to permit another highly polluting industrial operation that's going to hit your community. You can make a Green Amendment argument and say, look, that not only have we lost our right to clean air, period, but we can demonstrate that we're being disproportionately targeted and impacted by this air pollution as compared to everybody else in our region or in our state. And that disproportionate impacting becomes a constitutional violation. So even if you felt like you couldn't, you were going to have trouble proving that the air pollution was so bad that, it was harming people at that highest constitutional level, the existence of that environmental racism, intentional or unintentional, that disproportionate impacting, that in and of itself becomes a problem. And that you can make that demonstration, and stop the continued placement of those highly polluting industrial operations by that community, and also start to get control over the existing problems that are there. So, there's so much, finally, there's this powerful recognition that environmental justice, environmental racism is real here in the United States, and that it is a systemic problem in the environmental protection laws that we pass and that we implement. And so having this constitution, and so powerful and so important that recognition is there. And now knowing that we are bringing the Constitution to bear on addressing that, I think is incredible value added. That's not another one of those areas of really powerful synergy that's so important. Like there's a lot of great environmental justice laws that are being passed in different states, but they have loopholes, they have deficiencies, they will require increased consideration of environmental racism, but are they actually going to allow us to end the practice given the way the rest of the laws work? You need that extra added oversight, the constitutional oversight that a Green Amendment will provide. So that's another really powerful benefit that I like to highlight for people, along, of course, with the climate justice, which is really important because in the Green Amendment, we really are including climate language and protection for present and future generations. So we can also get to that issue. So I really try to get to everything, right? I like to try to, wrap it up in a nice bow for people. This is how we can get to all of these environmental issues that are so daunting and having such a hard impact, and we can do it together.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interdisciplinary problem, and this is a really nice, I don't want to use the word solution, but it's a really nice step towards creating a real solution that's a real long-term solution. And I'm curious, for somebody who, well, I was going to ask in Michigan, but now I just learned that there's like, how can people get involved? How can they, like, if they're in a state that has is starting to move along this track, how can they get involved? And if they're in a state that hasn't started working on a Green Amendment yet, how can they get started?
So if they go to the website, of course, which is www.forthegenerations.org. And if you forget that and you do www.greenamendment.org, it'll take you to the same place. There's a whole other story, but forthegenerations.org. And then what you can actually do is you can look up your state in the first instance. So are you in a state that has a Green Amendment? How can you get involved? Are you in a state where a Green Amendment has been proposed? How can you get involved? Are you in a state where nothing is happening yet? And then truthfully, I say, well, why don't you be the person to pick up the phone and call me? Because a number of our most, passionate Green Amendment efforts really literally started with one person who read my book, the Green Amendment, or they heard a podcast like this, or they heard a radio show, and they called me up and said, how can I make this happen in my state? And we started the conversation. And so that's really how New Mexico and Maine got started. And they have some of the most vibrant Green Amendment efforts advancing right now. And if you're in a state with a Green Amendment effort advancing, we actually have a state-specific website that you can get to from the forthegenerations.org website. So you go up, you look your active state. If you live in New Mexico, and click on New Mexico, it'll take you to the New Mexico website, which is www.nmgreenamendment.org. Like your state, if your state has a specific website, it's your state's letters plus greenamendment.org. And those websites have an action page, how you can take action, what's the status of the amendment, is there about to be a hearing, where you could go testify? Could you, here are some door hangers, you can sign up to get 100, 1,000, 5, I don't care what your number is, door hangers for your state. And you could go hang door hangers around your community to spread the word. Like we really try to make this so that there's a place and a space for everyone. If you're somebody who testifies, great, we really need your voice. But if you're not that kind of person, we still need you. And we find different ways to get people engaged. So forthegeneration.org is sort of the place to learn what's happening in your state. And then from there, we, give you a pathway to get involved.
Incredible. Wow. So accessible for like any level of activist, wherever they are in their journey. Yeah. Wow.
That's the goal, because again, we're all different. We're all different kinds of people. Not everybody likes to get up in the front of the room, and, it can be scary, whether it's a positive room or a not positive room, whether it's on Zoom or not on Zoom. For some people, that's just not their thing. But if you're the person who's like the people who do really great social media posts, blows my mind, the creativity, right? So again, there's something for everyone in the Green Amendment movement. We need you all, because we need all those gaps of activity filled by somebody super smart like you.
Great. We're going to put this on our social media. You're going to
do super creative social media, cool stuff.
I just want to make this louder. I want to do what we can to help you make this is really, really exciting and really cool.
You're awesome.
No, you're awesome.
Yeah. We're just
it's a little bit off topic that we've been talking about. But before we go, I really want to ask you about the West Virginia versus the EPA SCOTUS decision. And because you mentioned, and I think I get it, but how green amendments can really help with decisions like this and maybe make them not possible happening. But I kind of wanted to hear you speak on it.
Yeah. So that was a really horrifying decision. And it really, for a lot of people, really highlighted for them that there's something really wrong with our system of environmental protection. And it does help highlight the importance and power of a green amendment. So there are kind of, as with everything in the environment, there are kind of a couple highlights. So first and foremost, most people don't realize that environmental protection laws don't actually prohibit pollution and degradation. It's about managing it through permitting. And so if a company wants to fill a wetland, spew pollution into the air, whatever they want to do, they just have to make sure is there a law that even applies? If there's no law that applies, they can get away with it. But if there's a law that applies, who do I have to go to get my permit to legalize what it is that I want to do. Maybe, you might have to curb it or manage it. So, but just that reality that it's all about legalizing pollution and degradation, that's sort of an eye opener for people. And I think that the West Virginia case and the way the court talked about it, for some people, that opened up their eyes. Mm-hmm. The other thing about the West Virginia case is to really recognize that if you don't have solidified in law or in the Constitution, the obligation of government to do something to protect you. So in the West Virginia case, it was that Congress had not created the court did not feel that Congress had created an explicit enough obligation to address the climate crisis in the way the Environmental Protection Agency was trying to do, which was trying to get power plants to over time transition into clean and renewable energy options. And that lack of specificity, the court claimed existed, they used this to say, see, no, the Congress did not empower EPA to do anything like this. Therefore, we're not going to let you do it, period. And you've got to go back to the drawing board. And the truth is, one of the things about our laws is that there is
it's a dog moment.
It was the package deliverer was about to come and go and everything was fine, and then on the way past the window knocked on the window to let me know there was a package outside and the dogs to know that he was there too. Anyway, so I have to remember he just came back.
Adamant about this package delivery.
You have to know.
You do.
It's more
I'm
books.
so sorry.
It's
So
more
sorry.
books.
No, I think it might. I don't know. Anyway, so where was I?
If you don't have an obligation.
I know what I said. So one of the things is that since the mid 1980s, there has been a precedent in law that says when an agency is empowered to carry out a law that Congress has written, the courts give deference to that agency and say, yes, you're the one that has the expertise. You're the one that has the knowledge. Congress wanted you to carry out this work to protect air quality. So even though we don't exactly agree with you on how you're doing it, we're not going to pretend to be the experts. We defer. We give deference. And in this case, the Supreme Court justices totally ignored that those, what is it, 84, 94, 04, ignored that 30 plus years of precedent, 40 years of precedent. And so it was just another thing. So they set it aside. And that was really a shock for everybody, because that is a standard principle under the law. And so this idea that these 6 justices could, out of the blue, just pluck new laws, ignore old precedents in order to totally undermine the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect present and future generations from the devastations of a climate crisis was really shocking for people. And what it really told activists and lawyers and everybody who's paying attention is that this group of justices is going to do anything and everything they can to undermine environmental protection here in the United States of America, and instead to serve the goals of industry and their friendly politicians in office. That's it. That's the blanket statement. And they will make up rules to make that happen. And so if we're living in that reality, we have to really recognize we need to go back to the states to get better protections at the state level, because we all also know that nothing's going to happen in the current Congress, right? Mm-hmm. Everything's at a standstill. And even though everybody should care about clean water, clean air, a livable climate, and healthy environments, politics and politicking gets in the way.
Yeah.
But the other so we have to go down to the state level. But the other message that this really solidifies home is that it is all about politics and politicking. That the way these laws are written, all the power is in the hands of the legislators. The people do not have the power. And so the only way that we can transform that is for the people literally to take their power back, through a constitutional amendment, because the Constitution is the people saying to government, we are giving you permission to govern us. But when we give you that permission, here are the rules of the road. And we are now adding to the rules of the road our rights to a clean, safe, and healthy environment, and to tell you that when you govern, you may not infringe on those fundamental rights. So that was another really powerful message that sort of wasn't overtly obvious for people, but really is in there, is that we need the power to come back to the people and not be in the hands of six justices in any court, and not be in the hands of legislators who are, put into office in no small part due to the contributions of big business, and where lobbying and jockeying by big business and big money, get you a lot of success. And most people don't have that same level of access. And then all of it really got complemented and slammed home by the decisions that came just before, which was, of course, the Dobbs decision, where the Supreme Court said, listen, it's not explicit. It doesn't say explicitly anywhere in the Constitution that if you have a uterus, you have a right to control your own body, and that you have a right to an abortion. And so therefore, we say it doesn't exist. And by contrast, in the New York rifle case, they say, hey, it's really clear in the Constitution, to them, not to me, but it's really clear in the Constitution. You have a right to bear arms. Therefore, anything that would infringe on that right, anything that would limit that right, we're going to wipe out. So that really solidifies, right, that idea that if you want to have a right to something, it has to be clearly and explicitly in the Constitution at that highest level, which here in the US is the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution, right? And so that's how you weave all those pieces together. I think for most people it was like, holy crap, we are facing climate catastrophe. And these six people decided that we were just going to take away the authority of the EPA to save us and our children and our grandchildren. And if we don't have children, other children that we care about, and communities and species. And there's literally nothing we can do about it.
No.
And that's the shocker for people.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be done.
Yep.
You need that higher power, and that's the Constitution. Now, that's not to say if, when we had this with civil rights, right, the Supreme Court in the US for far too long misinterpreted and misapplied the Constitution, right, in order to strip away the rights of Black people for far too long, right, to allow separate schools, to allow all those horrifying things to happen. But because there was recognition in the Constitution that got placed into the Constitution, the people had the power to go back and claw back and claim back their rights. The problem, the problem is if it's not there, you can't.
Right. And that's why I think I really love the piece about adding environmental justice language into the amendment, because that adds an additional protection on people and humans, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, sex, sexual preference. Like when you add environmental justice language there, you protect them too. You protect everybody with a human identity. I love that.
Yeah. And the thing is with the Green Amendment is that's there anyway, but it's hard for people to see it unless I'm there to explain it to them. And we don't want to have to explain it to anybody. We don't want to have to help them say, okay, this is how, just say it. Right. And then everybody understands. And that clarity, too, shows a respect and a recognition of importance, as you say, is really also meaningful to people. And that's part of what this is about. Like, we want you to know that we care about you, and we're going to protect you, and we're going to help save your community when the government lets you down.
Yeah. Wow. Really, really, really beautiful movement.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now is
I think so too. I think so too. I think it's just transformational. I
totally agree. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. So gosh. Okay. So you mentioned folks can find you on forthegenerations.org. That's your main website. Can you tell us where else can folks find you and how can they get a copy of your upcoming book?
Right. So if you just type in Maya van Rossum or you just type in the Green Amendment, the truth is you'll find everything. Right. Or if you type in Maya and the Green Amendment, it really is all there. I think I'm pretty findable and pretty accessible. I am excited. The book isn't out yet. It'll be out November 1. As we talked about earlier, there's some pre-publication copies that are coming out into the world, but it's not available till November 1. But I really hope that people are inspired by it and enjoy it. And in the meanwhile, there's a whole lot you can do to help get this movement going by going to forthegenerations.org, finding a fact sheet, going on social media, sharing a tweet or a post or an Instagram. And that will really help grow our movement and grow the work. Because ultimately, that's what this is about, right? I want people to know if somebody buys a book, not a single penny goes in Maya's pocket. All the money goes to the Green Amendment movement, because this is about saving the world, not making money. And while I hope that people enjoy the book, and the first edition got some kind recognitions and awards for how it was written, because it really is I try to write it in a way that makes it enjoyable to read, although there's a lot of heavy stuff in there. But it really is kind of a glorified fact sheet, because it's really helping people to understand why this is important, who's getting hurt, how we can help them, and how we can make a difference. So, but you don't have to wait for the book to get that information. It is on the website.
Beautiful.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching, everybody, and for listening. And if this is the type of content you like, please like and subscribe so that more come into your feed when we post more.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
See you next time. Bye, everybody. Bye.